It is Monday, so navels have to be gazed at. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about all the things I didn't do last week and stuff like that. You know, the usual, like, weekly part of me figuring out what I did, what I read, what I plan to read, what I plan to do, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it wasn't too bad of a week, I think. So let's start with the readings and the little reading I did. So after finishing I Have No Mouth and I Have My Scream and Other Works, which is, of course, a collection of, 3 collections of short stories by Harlan Ellison, I switched, or not switched, but I decided to read something more positive. Just kidding. I started reading The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, which is a very powerful book. You should read it. It's really good. It's also very dark. It's like, if Charles Dickens was actually, for grown-ups kind of thing. So yeah, I'm definitely really enjoying it. I'm done with it at this point, so I'm glad I read it. Good book is my point. And then, it was Thursday, and Adama by David Hidar came out, so I read that, and then I returned to the Jungle, and that's roughly all I read last week, which is very little. Oh yeah, and I read obviously some more Produced Street Station for that ongoing read along over at Do Unicorns Reads channel. So we did that, and I think that covers all of it, reading wise. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all the books I read. Obviously, I also did read some more in that companion to the works of Johann Gottfried Herder, and at least had the Dialectics of Enlightenment open. But that's kind of the thing. Oh, and I did start reading a new book today, which is, of course, called, let me think, gods, Late Escapism and Contemporary Neoliberalism, Alienation, Work and Utopia, by Greg Schatzer? Weird name. Anyway, it's a book about escapism and why it is, sort of, and I'm really excited to read that. And we'll come back to that in a moment when I talk about when we're reaching the free rambling plan. So this is obviously what I plan to read this week. It's definitely going to be this book on escapism. I'll obviously also read some fiction. I'm not quite sure what to read next. It's all a bit of a blur. I might move on and read another Marlon James novel, John Crow's Devil, because it's currently free on Audible, and it's a free book. I'm not going to say no to any of that. So there's that. Beyond that, obviously, I'm always willing to listen to recommendations and then willfully ignore them, but I'm pretty sure something will come up that I decide to read or reread, so I'm a bit vague there. I'll definitely, as I said, read the book on escapism. There's another book on escapism, depending on how insecure I feel, I might go there, and just possibly I might start reading Hild by Nicola Griffith. Not quite sure yet. Maybe that will move into next week, so it'll be closer to the release date of the follow-up, which is Mennewood, and we'll see how that goes. So these are my reading plans at the moment. What about videos, however? Well, as it turns out, last week was incredibly productive, sort of, for me. Because I did actually finally make a video on Maror by David Hidar, and then I made a video on Adama by David Hidar, and then I made a video on Thud by Terry Pratchett, and I made a video where I talked about the question whether art can be subjective or objective, which was a bit of a response to a video that Jordan over at iWizard made on the same topic, and I violently disagreed, but I tried to keep it all calm and professional, so that's something I did. So that's 4 videos. In addition to that, I was also on another Produced Street Station live stream discussion over at the Unicorns Read channel together with Varsha from Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and Jared of the Fantasy Thinker, and Dan from the Black and Blue Color Reader, and Mary from Mary Reads to Live. So that was fun, as always, and Produced Street Station is obviously a great book, so that was a lot of fun. So 4 videos and one live stream. That's quite a lot, like, compared to what I've done the last couple of weeks. So the question is, of course, will I be able to keep this up? And the answer is, of course, no. I have no idea what kind of videos I'll do this week. I have one project that I'm working on right now, and we'll come back to that in a minute. I hope I'll be able to get that one out tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. After that, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll still do something about Harlan Ellison, but I'm not quite sure. And maybe I'll talk about The Jungle, but I'm also not quite sure about that. So it's all a bit up in the air there, and I just try to see what comes up. It would be nice to finally make the next Guy Gabriel Kay Sunday school book video on, A Song for Arbonne, but I don't want to promise anything that I'll then be incapable of, delivering, because, I do that all the time, and maybe I shouldn't. So, yeah, video ideas, I'm somewhat out there. If you have something where like, hey, could you make this video? You can let me know, and I'll probably also willfully ignore pleas for specific videos. But you can tell me if you have something that you want me to talk about, and maybe it'll inspire me. Stranger things have happened sometimes. So yeah, what about that video that I'm currently working on? See, a lot of times I very much follow my gut feelings when it comes to creating videos. I'm like, I have an inspiration, and then I go and I'm like, well, I should probably make this. And sometimes that works really well and really quickly. For example, with that video on subjectivity or objectivity in art and art criticism. I watched that video, I got angry, I made a video. It went quickly. Other times, obviously, it takes a lot of planning, and suddenly I spent months and months and months working on a video and never ever finishing it. That also has happened. And then there's, of course, the videos about specific books where it's very clear, where I have a schedule. It's like, well, I'll read the book, I talk about it for 20 minutes, we're done. And, with something like Adama coming out, or the week before, The Circumference of the World coming out, that's fairly easy, and that's already scheduled, so that's fine. And if I'm, interested in a specific book, then that works really well. Or with, the Discworld novels, where I'm like, well, we're having this read-along, it'll move on, so I know what book to read or reread in a Discworld case, and then just make the video, which is fairly easy. And then there's obviously the weird thing in between, which is the video that I'm currently working on, or planning to work on, which is about escapism. Because I had that idea yesterday, while taking a shower, which is usually where I have ideas. And frankly, I think it would be much easier for me if I could just record me thinking aloud in the shower. But alas, this is not OnlyFans, this is YouTube, so I can't do that. Also, probably no one wants to see that. But that's sort of the point where I get ideas in the weirdest places, and showers are obviously really good for having ideas. And then, because yesterday I was already working on the Thud video, and I'm like, well, I'll do that the next day. And then I started thinking about it, and that's always when things get dangerous, and I just don't switch on the camera and just rant for 20 minutes. I have time to actually do the dangerous thing, which is do research. And suddenly, now I have a book to read, which puts me on a specific schedule that is no longer, hey, I'll just switch on the camera, because now I have to finish that book first and do research, and maybe read that other book that is also on escapism at the same time, or read that one afterwards. Maybe I should do that, and that's kind of where we hit that problem, because I am a very insecure person in a lot of ways. I know that may come across, that may sound weird, but I'm incredibly insecure when it comes to saying things on YouTube, which is, why I do so much research. It's like, I could probably have done a lot of videos, like the deeper, more complicated videos, like the Arthurian one, or the anti-Semitism video earlier this year. I could have probably made those videos with much less research, without rereading certain books again and again, rereading certain chapters again and again. I could have done that. Because the sad truth is, the number of people that will actually realize that I have skipped something in my research is fairly limited, which is sad. But, that's kind of the problem there. But I'm constantly worried about that, which is why I could have probably just made a 10-minute or 15-minute video on my issues with how we deal with escapism just yesterday. But I didn't, because I'm worried, and I'm like, well, I want to get this right. And then once I'm locked in that more involved process of doing research and maybe writing structure down and stuff like that, once I do that, it's very easy to have that weird, like, I don't want to call it feature creep, but it's kind of that idea. It's like, well, I could also add this bit and this bit and this bit, and I do research. And the more I do that, the more insecure I get, because obviously now I have had time to think, and that's where I have, when the anxiety creeps in. I'm obviously a very anxious person in a lot of ways. Once again, I know that may sound weird when we're talking about me, making lots of videos, which, yeah, it's weird. Don't ask. I don't understand it either. So, which is, for example, why that Brandon Sanderson video is still not made, even though I've been, talking about it and thinking about it all the way since, like, I don't know, April or so, or even earlier. And that's a problem. Because, yeah, I'm worried that I will not be able to explain, say, the concept of culture industry as according to Adorno and Horkheimer in 10 minutes, which is bullshit, because I've read the essays twice. I've read the Dialectics of Enlightenment 3 times by now, well, just in the last year. It won't get much better. Like, seriously, it won't get much better when it comes to, like, doing research on that topic. But I've also spent, like, months thinking about it, and that has made me much more worried than I would have been if we, just switched on a camera and was like, well, here's how I think culture industry works. And I need to figure out a way to do that, or to figure out when to stop worrying, when to stop double checking or triple checking or quadruple checking or whatever you want to call it. I need to find a way to do that, and I'm honestly not sure how to do that, because I'm also not sure, as I like. The question that I'm wrestling with is usually when doing these videos or anything in that vein is obviously the question, like, what does my audience expect? What do you guys expect? For example, when I was doing the Arthurian video, the Arthur video, there was another video on Arthurian myth that I know the booktuber whose name I have forgotten because I put out, and that was like 8 minutes, and I'm like, yeah, mine's 4 hours. But which one will be more popular? Which one will actually work for people? Which one do people want? 8 minutes or 4 hours? And that's sort of something that is, linked to that insecurity where I'm like, sort of like the expectations I have for myself, the standards or the goals of the channel. Because, see, there's a difference between entertainment and education, and talking about books can be both. Talking about fantasy books can be both. If you do a book haul, that's clearly entertainment. If you do a spoiler-free review, well, I'd call that customer information or a sales pitch. I wouldn't call it full-on education, but it certainly leans close into the educational aspect. If you have a 2-hour discussion about a book, or just a quarter of a book, as we did last night, there is a lot of education possibly happening there, showing insights, stuff like that, where people can learn and think about their approach to the book and, feel smarter afterwards. But there's also obviously still a factor of entertainment. If there's jokes cracked that are funny or whatever, you just like listening to these people. There's conversations. All of the stuff we do on BookTube are sort of on that continuum from pure entertainment to pure education, where I just, upload like PowerPoint presentations and maybe narrate them, and that's that. And every time I make a video, and every time I try to make a video, I'm stuck somewhere on that continuum. And I personally tend to move closer to the educational side of things and not the entertainment side of things, mostly because I feel that my strengths are more in, knowing stuff and telling people about stuff I know than being funny. I don't see myself as a funny person. So the educational part kind of does that. But like with an educational approach, suddenly, the standards, the bar is much higher, because at least I don't want to give the wrong information or miseducate people. Obviously, there's people on YouTube who are very reckless with the stuff they talk about or the stuff they claim to know. And that's like almost like an ethical question there. It's like, how certain do you want to be? Now, if I were a teacher at a university, my standards would be really high, because if you're a professor giving lectures, the standard is incredibly high, or should be incredibly high. Obviously, not always is incredibly high, but that's kind of the thing. If you're a teacher in a primary school, getting some things or facts wrong probably doesn't matter that much. It's more like the broad strokes of stuff you got to teach. So there's different standards, but the question is like, where does a YouTube video fall on that continuum? Where does it fall there? It's like, because the responsibility potentially is huge, right? If I make a video and there's something wrong in there, and 500-600 people watch that video, 500 or 600 people have the wrong information now, and depending on how seriously they take me, that can potentially do a lot of damage. Now, if you go into like the more political side of YouTube or general communication, suddenly that stuff is incredibly dangerous. If I go out and tell you something that then makes you do harmful things in the future, believe harmful things about people, yeah, that's brutal. Now, obviously, the potential risks are maybe smaller if I just talk about Arthurian books, or if I just talk about whatever it is I'm talking about at any given moment, whether art is subjective or objective, for example. The consequences, the direct, immediate consequences, are less stark. But with a video on anti-Semitism that I did earlier, I don't have to tell you that the consequences are pretty brutal when talking about these kind of things. And you already know that, and that's sort of something that I'm constantly struggling with. By which I mean, I feel I have a responsibility to get things right. But because, right or correctness is, in this case, always something of, is not like a binary thing with a lot of things. There are obviously provable facts and stuff like that, but there's, that thing of where you call it like due diligence. Like, at what point have I done enough research? And especially when we're talking about stuff like philosophy or history, these things are malleable. They're never fully explained in a lot of ways. Yes, there are facts in archaeology or history that you can pinpoint, but that's not how history or historiography works, or philosophy works. Like, it's very much about something else, which is connecting these kinds of facts and provable facts into a thesis, an argument, a narrative almost. And, I'm telling you something. It's a narrative that I'm weaving, and with that come other tricks. It's like, do I drop a bit of information and not put it in because 99% of you probably don't want that fact or don't need that fact to make the larger argument? I can leave that out to have a clearer and more easy, more accessible narrative. Or should I also mention the odd facts that make life and the world so messy and complicated? And that's a question that I'm constantly wrestling with now. I don't want to say neurotic in that regard, but I certainly tend to overthink, and I certainly tend to try to get things as right as possible, or overly right, which means that I get bogged down with all these issues. For example, talking about the culture industry, which is not that complicated a problem. I mean, once you've read this stuff twice or three times, it's not that hard. I should be able to just do it, but because of that fear of getting things wrong, I stopped actually making videos, which is where the spontaneity comes in. Now, once again, like earlier when I did the read-along thing for The Wheel of Time or the Malazan Book of the Fallen, it's much easier because it's a very limited scope. It's just one thing. It's like, well, I read 3 chapters today. This is what we'll talk about. And that's fairly easy. But as soon as it's more like a general thesis, a general argument, an essay, so to speak, although I don't feel comfortable calling what I do here like video essays, but as soon as it moves towards that direction, it becomes much more complicated in a way. It's like writing, it's a bit like writing a paper for university. You need to come up with a thesis, you need to structure it, and well, the problem is, of course, that when you do that at university, after a while, you kind of know what your professors are expecting, what kind of stuff you need to put in, their standards, all of that shit. You can do that. Structure helps in those ways and forms. But with YouTube, there are no standards out there. It's like, I can do whatever the fuck I want, and some people will watch it. So that external justification or those guidelines, they're not there, and that sometimes makes it very hard for me to do anything. And that is obviously the danger, that the longer I work on a project, the easier I get distracted with something new, because, something shiny, or I'll take a shower every couple of months or whatever, and suddenly I have a new idea, which happens when I take a shower. and then I run off and do something else, which does not necessarily help with making this a more productive thing. So I guess at the end of it all, I'm very happy I managed to do 4 videos last week. I think that's really cool. I'll try to come up with projects or stuff that are so structured in a way that makes it easy for me to make those videos and not get bogged down in suddenly doing research for something that could have been done in 20 minutes. I'll try to do that, but I'll still have to read this book on escapism. I feel I owe it to, to myself, but definitely also to all of you, because, it's a thesis that I have there, and it's a political thesis, and you know me, I'm very much a political person, and a lot of stuff that I talk about with books comes back to politics in a lot of ways, and politics, there's responsibilities, and I try to take them seriously. So I hope that with this specific topic, reading this book, or maybe the second book about escapism as well, will be enough. And then I'll try to put it out, and then hopefully some people get really angry at me and use that anger to write, comments or make response videos and get a discussion started. Because at the end of the day, we need to talk. Is my point. We need to discuss these things. There has to be discourse and not just talking at each other. We need to talk with each other, and that's sort of the thing I want to have here: discourse. Anyway. These are my thoughts on this Monday. I'm, very happy I did stuff. Now I hope you had a good week and did read some cool books. If you haven't read Circumference of the World yet, if you haven't read Adama yet, go do that. They're good books. They're excellent books. Watch some videos. Do whatever brings you joy. I hope you have a good time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you in the next one, hopefully very soon. And until then, cheers.